Okay, am I live? Yeah, let's go for it. Good morning, comic book fans. Welcome back to Comics in 5 Minutes. I'm your ever-loving host, Shorty, and it's a perfect, cold, autumnal day. Lovely, crisp sky out there when I was taking my dog for a walk yesterday, crunching on leaves. It was brilliant. So let's review this really nice, happy book about autumn, shall we? Of course, it's not really nice and happy. I was about to say it's Vault Comics. If they don't do nice, happy comics, they do. What they have is their little imprint there, Nightfall, which lets them do some actual horror stuff. And that's good, because I like horror comic books. I really, really do. I like horror in general, though. Give me like a nice cabin in the woods, teeny slasher kind of movie, and I'm set for the night. This one is not that kind of horror, though. Like, straight off the bat. In fact, it's kind of hard to classify it as what kind of horror it wants to be, because for the most part, it just is a story. And I've said before, I like a day in the life of as much as the next person. This one isn't even that, though. It's very difficult to categorize. You spend most of this comic book just trying to figure out who's who and what's going on. That is not a bad thing. I think I'd be more annoyed if they just laid everything out there in front of you. Like I was talking the other day about comics which have an awful lot of exposition in them and set everything up so you know what's going on. It's really, I think, easy to overdo that. I prefer it when the exposition is just a nice idea about what's going on, like a little bit of a background of the world without necessarily telling you how that relates to what's actually going on in the comic book. That's really good. This doesn't even scratch the surface of that. The closest you get is the fact that stuff is not good. Like, at all. There is multiple levels of the not goodness. There is a young daughter with social and mental condition, which means she lashes out violently to other children. Her mum, who is an alcoholic, a heavy drinker, shall we say, who's just got out of an abusive relationship and still carrying the bruises and scars from it. Whose mother has died, whose mother pretty much abandoned her from what you can see, or was at least distant and potentially abusive as well. But she has at least been left a house, so she goes to this tiny little town to find out what's going on there. And this is where I'm actually going to talk to you about the artwork for the first time. Usually I start the artwork a little bit earlier. I do love it, and this is when you get to the town. In frame, yeah, there we go. That looks pretty cool, doesn't it? Yeah, lovely, beautiful. But it's slightly off kilter, just a tiny, tiny little bit. It's a perspective thing, where, I mean, I'm about to say where the camera is. There's no camera, obviously, there's just somebody drawing it. But if you put the camera in the right place, it'll look beautiful. Tilt it so slightly off, the perspective doesn't look right. It is, you could sit there with a set square and it'd all make absolutely perfect sense. But because your view isn't exactly where it should be from, it just makes it seem slightly unnerving, and that's great. Add to that, and this is something which runs throughout the entire comic book, the colouring is absolutely beautiful. I don't want to say 100% that it's watercolor, but if it's digital coloring, it's designed to make it look exactly like watercolor, to the point that even if I'm looking for it, there's a few bits where I'm like, damn, that actually might be somebody doing it with a paintbrush. It actually might be, I don't know. And that is very, very impressive. And it also uses colors so effectively. I mean, a book called Autumnal, you'd expect it to do that. But it isn't just necessarily like the golden browns and the reds and the oranges and all that kind of stuff. It's the slightly colder, the greens and the blues, and then the splashes of color thrown in it. There's an excellent bit where it's somebody looking through a door, glass in a door, and you can see they use the coloring of the glass to add an extra level to that one. That is brilliant. That is very well thought out. That weirdly doesn't add anything to the story. Like, sometimes I'll talk about the artwork as if it is like a fundamental aspect of what's going on, and for comic books that should be like the aim. This one, it managed to go slightly above that without ever actually needing to. It does it simply for the sake of being beautiful, and that is not a bad thing, especially when you do get to bits later on and it becomes slightly disturbing. Now, the disturbing stuff, it's not the most surprising. Like, there's a guy they meet when they first get to the town who's just creepy as all hell, and that's like perfectly in keeping with most horror tropes about going to a small town in the middle of nowhere. And then there's kids singing a song, hanging out in a park, doing the little ring around the rosy kind of thing, and it's exceptionally disturbing. But here we get another excellent bit of the artwork. She's remembering stuff about what happened when she was a kid, but she doesn't remember it purely just in case of like the words, but the feeling and the smell and the sounds. And she mentions chalk, and you just get stuff like that going on in the sides, like the past just sneaking in and interfering that little bit with it. But then you actually get the story, the song. You're not going to be able to see all the detail on that one, but I love how it's presented as like children's chalk drawings with the song being played over it. That, unfortunately, is the only downside of the entire thing. Is that song is what can be taken a little bit too literally. and does not bury the lead at all about what's going to happen, because you do get a very cool ending. But there's something in that song which kind of gives it away. Now, this could be because I'm a horror fan and I'm looking for this kind of stuff, and I'm kind of like built to look into the tropes of horror. So when I see something, I make the connections in my head straight away. And because it's fairly clear they are doing a lot of horror tropes, that's not necessarily a hard thing to do. Does it stop it being good? No. It actually is excellent, because they really pay that last little that tease out so perfectly. It could have been a jump scare in a comic book. They could have managed that. They didn't. They left it there for you to pick it up and then follow the thread, and they made that thing go around a couple of extra places you weren't expecting. It double back on itself, have an extra creepy person just turn up for no reason before you finally get to it when you think it's not there. Expertly done horror. In a comic book, that's hard to do. Absolutely love it. I've just checked how long I've been going for. I need to stop right now. This is soon going to be comics in 10 minutes. But I will say, if you are a horror fan, this is something you want to be paying attention to. It is exceptionally good. That's it from me. I know it's Saturday tomorrow, but I've got loads to review, so I'll be back tomorrow with another one. Bye.